So I know the past couple of weeks people have been really like listening to heavy to Prince and watching Purple Rain and everything like that. But if everyone can take a little time out for some George Michael and Keanu, they'll make the world a better place. Went to see Keanu today, Key and Peele written movie, and I really had fun at this film. Had a big smile across my face and was laughing pretty much throughout the entire runtime. It is very much a Key and Peele product. It has a lot of their comedic sensibilities, which is fine by me, and I guess that will be a lot of appeal for people coming in. If you're not really a big Key and Peele fan, it might be a bit of a harder sell, but I feel this could very well have fit into their sketch show format when they had Key and Peele running, but at the same time it works as a film on its own. Now compare this to other examples of comedic writers and sketch comedy show writers kind of taking their ideas or their sensibilities to a larger or longer format like feature film. I'd say this is one of the more successful endeavors compared to something like, say, Tim Meadows' Ladies' Man character getting a feature film, or The Night the Roxbury film. Even stuff like anti-humor like Tim and Eric with their $1 billion, whatever the hell that was. This is one of those films that really works on its own as a full story, but at the same time has a lot of stuff that you enjoy from these two guys. Now, it's not necessarily them lifting characters and sketches straight from their show and putting it into a feature-length format. Like I said, it has a narrative that has characters that grow and develop as the movie goes on, but there are nice little subtle references to some of their in-jokes from Key and Peele, as well as you could take 5 minutes out of any part of this movie and it would have fit their format very well on its own. But thankfully, the little interactions between characters throughout this movie are highly entertaining, and like I said, the story just keeps progressing, and it's pretty exciting actually. Like I mentioned before, there's a lot of sort of callbacks. Like at one point, Keegan and Jordan end up going to a Liam Neeson's movie and they're like really psyched about that, so that's them playing their valet characters for like a bit, but I kind of like that little reference. Whenever they adopt their thug voice or thug personas, that's always a callback to like whenever they had to play really ghetto or thug characters in the show, and I like that. But it all works really well. Like at no point, as outlandish as the premise can be and as silly some of the action or some of the spectacle can be in this movie, it is very much grounded in some kind of reality and some kind of character motivation. So by the trailers, you've probably gathered that this is very much a lampoon or a parody of something like John Wick, in which you have protagonists who go out of their way to do things for the sake of a pet. And this is very much lampooning what John Wick ended up doing for the death of his adorable little puppy, done with a very charismatic, very just endearing and adorable kitten. And I've been a couple of kittens in here, like stunt cats essentially, but each of these animals, I think maybe they had like 2 or 3 probably on the shoot, but each of these animals are just like so heart-melting and so just unbelievably cute that even with this just outright parody of over-the-top action movies, you could definitely buy the stuff that these two guys go through to get this cat back. I'm not a big cat person really. I like cats. I get along fine with them. Definitely, I could see myself kind of taking a couple of risks in order to kind of save this wee little kitten who ends up just mewing and calling out in such the sweetest way, and showing up, and you've seen in previews again, showing up with its little like gold chain collar and do-rag on it, like just the cutest little thing. And it works for this movie. It works for these characters' kind of motivation to go through all the shit that they go through. And like I mentioned before, at no point does the comedy or the personalities presented in this movie ever feel annoying or stagnant the way they would in something like, say, A Night at the Roxbury, where the gag is, hey, here's this 5-minute sketch, and these characters who are in that 5-minute sketch, let's stretch that out over an hour and a half. Like, it never really loses momentum, and that works very well to its advantage because, like I mentioned, the characters grow and develop. As funny as the movie is, there is a lot of heart in this story. The fact that this is what Jordan's character is doing to kind of keep some semblance of a stable relationship in his life following the breakup between him and his girlfriend. The fact that there's this little kitten who kind of saved him and gave him a purpose for kind of carrying on. You buy that a character like that would devote himself to making sure that this little guy is safe. Keegan's character, he plays a very overly suburban and overly domesticated version of himself in a way. It's a little thing in the movie that starts off where his wife is going away for the weekend with a friend of their families and their daughters are friends, and his wife just mentions, matter of factly, like, you be relaxed, try to get relaxed, because he's a little uptight and wound tight, and you kind of follow his journey as throughout the movie he becomes looser and looser and embraces more of this thuggish persona that he initially just puts on as a front. But then when shit gets real, either in the actual gangster side of the story or in his personal life, like at some point in the movie his wife calls him up and she's stressed out about something, and it affects him greatly to the point that he is fully embracing this badass side to him, and he sells it, and it's really like hilarious to watch him like just channel this rage. And they actually take on dual roles, both Key and Peele in this. They take on these personas and then they play another set of characters, these Allentown brothers, the long hair, and you see them in the commercials. They're the ones doing like the Matrix flips off of walls. They're like sadistic torturers and stuff like that, and they're mistaken for these guys at first by Method Man, who actually I really enjoyed in this movie as well. He's a great kind of antagonist for these two. There are little jokes here and there, but then a lot of them have great payoffs down the line in the movie if you're really paying attention to this film. At one point, Key and Peele's characters are getting to know the crew they're going to be running with for this one drug trade, and they're going around saying, it's really funny, they start saying like, alright, here's my name, and say 2 things about yourself, and they're saying stuff like, I've killed this many people, and I saw Blair Witch at a pre-screening before we even knew if that shit was real or not. And like, that's pretty funny. But then they approach one of their crew members, and the guy's like, yeah, my name is Trunk, I got a mean left hook, and the reason they call me Trunk is because one time I locked my keys in my trunk. You gotta be careful with that shit. And you kind of laugh about that, and then you go on. But then later on in the movie, they're kind of almost found out by Method Man's character, and they have Will Forte as a pot dealer, as Jordan's pot dealer who lives next door to him, in the trunk of a car. And they open it up, and he almost gives away who they really are, but then Jordan slams the trunk shut, and then you see Trunk in the background being like, yo man, make sure you got your keys there. Like, just those little lines really have great payoff in the end. Key ends up experiencing like a drug hallucination, and this whole like drug hallucination, like I said, could have fit in their sketch comedy very well. Like, he ends up being incorporated into the George Michael Faith music video, and he's just like, oh man, this is my favorite song, and just starts dancing along with George Michael archive footage. It's really kind of cool like that. It's very well shot too, even for like action sequences. There's slow-mo, of course. They're parodying a lot of the slow motion stuff. It feels like they parody a lot of what was going on in John Wick, but also a lot of what goes on in, say, Michael Bay films. It helps that like one of the composers on the movie actually has done scores for Michael Bay movies, so it has kind of that very epic, resounding, like Bad Boys almost type of orchestral score going for it. But a lot of the slow-mo stuff, even as outlandish as it can be, is still fun and kinetic. And again, tying with the fact that even though it's in this very silly world, that there are stakes. Even though I had a feeling that the characters would make it out of it okay, that at least they don't come out of it unscathed, and that there were some kind of stakes involved throughout the story. There are times when, especially at the end, when there's this high-speed car chase, and Luis Guzman is incorporated into that at some point, but Peele's like veering in and out of traffic, and at one point the car crashes and like Luis Guzman goes flying out of the windshield. There comes a point where they're like yelling out for Keanu, they're yelling out for the cat, and there's part of me on the edge of my seat going, oh my god, is the cat okay? For real, I'm seriously concerned about this kitten. Like, as much as I was like, I think this will wrap up fine, there was part of me very much like, oh man, would they kill off the kitten in this story? That would be so heartbreaking. And even when Key and Peele themselves are kind of in some danger, they do some outrageous shit, like when they're getting to know their crew a little bit more. The lead like girl enforcer in the gang, who's like the only confident gang member really, she's like calling out Key and Peele about whether or not they are actually these kick-ass assassins, and is like, prove it. I heard you did like a run up a wall and did a flip off of a wall during the fight, and that opens up the movie. It's like, prove it. And Jordan's very much like, nah, he ain't gotta prove nothing. We ain't gotta prove nothing to you. But in the background, you see Keegan do this run, and he does the flip, and it works, and everyone's like, oh! But what sells that moment, as silly as that moment is his reaction to it, because as he touches down, you see the look on Keegan's face, like, and whenever he gives like a rough look at everyone else, he's like, yeah, I got that. But then as he goes over to Peele, he's just like, it's those little moments that make the comedy work and that make the most ridiculous looking spectacle in this film really work, and that you're like, yes, this is totally like what these characters would be doing. I highly enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the pace of it. At no point did it feel like, okay, this is a bit that's going a little too long. Anna Faris shows up as herself, and even though I'm not a big Anna Faris fan, her scenes work in this movie very well. She's like this really like just sadistic, messed up, highly like almost evil genius version of herself. At no point did I really think like, okay, I've had enough of this scene. And it had purpose, it had context into the movie as a whole. I'm not going to give it away, but there's a twist towards the end that I really didn't see until about 10 seconds before it happened. And about 10 seconds before the twist is revealed with a certain character, I was like, oh my god, I think I get it. And it felt very natural, it felt very much like part of the story. And story is the main thing here, because again, it comes back to the fact that this just doesn't feel like a series of sketches they wrote and somehow loosely shambled together into a script. It feels like this has an intent to be a parody, but also to be this very fulfilling kind of story about these two friends and their kind of devotion to each other and to this just adorable little kitten, and their own growth. Like, one guy is trying to just loosen up a little bit more, and the other guy is trying to get over his tragedy of his failed relationship in a way, and he kind of does, without playing heavily into too much romance either. There's a romance that's hinted at in the movie, but thankfully it doesn't go the route of being like the way it would in a typical comedy where they get together or something like that, and then there's a third act breakup and then they resolve by the end. It's nothing like that. It's very much in the background, but it serves its purpose well. But I really enjoyed this. Being a fan of the show when it was on, I'm glad that they've translated their sensibilities for comedy over into feature work, and I hope we see a lot more cool original ideas and original parodies and spoofs from them along this line, because this type really works. They're making fun of, you know, those style of movies, that type of story, but also at the same time really making it their own, and it's like loving fun in a way. It's not really mean-spirited. It's got a nice kind of love letter to something like a John Wick movie or a Michael Bay movie, with regards to its spectacle and with regards to its plot. Yeah, I have a feeling this would be a movie that I could probably sit down with my mom and dad, because I've shown them clips, the online clips of Key and Peele when I've been home, and they seem to really enjoy stuff like the substitute teacher sketch or the slow motion action scene sketch. I have a feeling if I were to show my dad and possibly my mom this movie, they would probably really enjoy its sense of humor. I'm wholeheartedly recommending you check out Keanu. I mean, what else are you gonna watch? Mother's Day by Gary Marshall, which, you know what? Hopefully by the end of the year I'll have seen that movie so I can put it on my worst list, because I've heard nothing but glorious things about it. Because I've seen Valentine's Day, I've seen New Year's Eve. I might as well finish the triumvirate of Gary Marshall sucking with Mother's Day, but I'm not going to be paying theater price for that. Yeah, this weekend before Civil War lands, I'd say Keanu is a surefire, like, enjoyable movie for you to go check out. I want to say if you are a Key and Peele fan, you'll enjoy it. Even if you really aren't that big a Key and Peele fan or weren't familiar with their show, I think there is still some stuff that you would really kind of enjoy in this film. Because as much as it is very much their writing and their timing and performance. There's a lot more going on with other characters. A lot of the supporting cast is really good in this. Then, of course, the kitten is adorable. And it's not necessarily needed to be at the front of every action scene or every sequence, but when the kitten does pop into view, it is very endearing and heartwarming and really just adorable as hell. I say adorable a lot in this, I know. Regardless, go check out Keanu. It's a good time.